I tend to spend my time inside the heads of the professional military people who are doing their best to honor their obligations and meet their commitments. But that's because those are the characters that I most empathize with. But you have to be aware that there are also characters, people out there who don't come at it that way. And those are usually the villains in my novels. Whether it's a Pavel Young who puts his personal privilege and pleasure ahead of his duties, or whether it is someone like Oscar Saint-Just, literally has no moral compass beyond what is going to serve my purposes and what isn't. Okay. Empire builders, cowards, the whole nine yards. It was Clausewitz who said, wars are fought by human beings, which is one of those, well, duh moments that when you think about it, has profound implications, because it means that wars are fought by fallible human beings. Okay? And his other aphorism that I'm especially fond of is that everything in war is very simple, but doing even simple things in a war is incredibly difficult. And if you think about it, that's absolutely true. But I think that your audience is going to have who reads your books, who watches your movies, is going to depend on who they strike a chord with. And when I see a bunch of guys who I know, or by the way, I use guys when I'm talking to the girls, the twins as well. It's sort of a non-gendered pronoun for me these days. But when I hear guys or guyettes who I know are active duty or have served or whatever, and they're recommending a book or a movie or whatever, I'm a whole lot more inclined to go give that a look than I am if a sociology professor from Connecticut is telling me that it's a good book. Now, I may find out that the sociology professor in Connecticut was a member of the 82nd Airborne, and I didn't know that, so I leapt to a conclusion. But there are stories that I still really, really, really want to tell that I'm really, really, really probably not going to have time to tell. And so I'm going to be gone without there ever getting out, And I hate that. I know that some of my readers will hate that, but I hate it because telling stories is what I do. And I know I'm going to leave with the work not finished. Did I ever tell you about when I flew out to New Mexico for Roger Zelazny's wake? It was at the Saberhagen's home, Fred and Joan Saberhagen. And I was there, and Jane was there, and a bunch of people were there, including George Martin. And after the gathering at the Saberhagens, a bunch of us moved out to Melinda Snodgrass's place. She was out more in the country outside Albuquerque. And George and I drove over together. George drove. And I had known that Roger was ill longer than a lot of people had. And George, who was very close to Roger, had been sort of blindsided by it. He didn't find out really that Roger was ill at all until Roger was in the hospital for his final stay, because Roger had not wanted it to be generally known for a lot of reasons, including the fact that he didn't want his friends going, "Are you okay, Roger?" You know what I'm saying? And he genuinely believed that he was going to beat it, I think, and was responding well to the chemo right up till it kind of went off a cliff there at the end. But anyway, so George is driving, and he says, "I can't believe he's gone." And I said, "Yeah, I know." And I said, "You know, it's not like the world didn't have a chance to see what this man could do. Okay. And you just got to look at his list of, you know, stack of Nebulas and Hugos to see that." But George said, "But he wasn't finished yet. He had so much still to do." And I said, "George, if Roger Zelazny had lived to be 98, he wouldn't have been done yet." Okay? Because Roger was a storyteller. All right? And I want somebody when I'm gone to say he wasn't done yet. Because I think that's the way that a craftsman wants to be remembered. You know what I'm saying? I'm not planning on, shuffling off tomorrow, but when you're approaching 70, not for another couple of years, thank you very much, but you're approaching 70 and you've been having some health issues. You're not bouncing back as quickly, and you fall on your stupid face on a cement floor. The fact that you are, you don't have 40 years anymore, kind of thing. It's borne in on you. And it starts sort of affecting it starts affecting the voice of your stories. And I don't think it starts, I think it enriches them in many ways, because you have more of a visceral awareness of how a character could feel that way. You may have that awareness intellectually when you're 35 and you're writing the story, and you may be able to write a character who has that awareness, okay? But it's not quite the same as writing from actually possessing that awareness yourself. It's the most horrible night of my life was that traffic accident on the road down from Boone. Okay. Still, I have the occasional really, really bad dream out of it. But it gave me an emotional awareness of what it's like for somebody to deal with the ruin of human bodies that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And I try to treat that with incredible respect when I draw upon it to write. But it's definitely there. Okay. So I think for a storyteller, everything that happens to him or her kind of gets filed away somewhere to be drawn on when you're telling the story. We talk about a writer's honesty with his or her readers. I think it's a mistake to assume that what you see a writer portraying is that writer, is that storyteller. But an honest storyteller puts a lot of his or her personal life experience into the story. Whether the person they're writing about is someone that they admire and respect or somebody they loathe, They still draw on their own experiences, their own knowledge when they build that character. I've mentioned before that one of my favorite literary universes in many ways, it's dark, it's very dark, is Steve Sterling's Draka novels. I don't know if you've read them.
I haven't. But
a lot of people assumed that Steve approved of the Draka. Okay. And by the end of the Draka cycle, these guys they're the descendants of unreconstructed Confederate slave owners who fled to South Africa and developed a slave owning society there that spread out. And it's no longer racially based slavery. Okay, it's master class and slave class. And eventually they genetically engineer themselves to an extent that they're no longer interfertile with other humans. Okay. And they're awful people. Okay. They don't say anything like about crucifying a slave every 10 paces on the road to Jerusalem, kind of thing. It's just the way it is. And then they go home and they read bedtime stories to their children. And people were like, oh my God, this man must be a monster. He likes these people. And in fact, the Draka were the worst villains that Steve could think of because they were sociopaths, in a sense. Okay? He played fair with their emotions among their own group. And in doing so, he demonstrated how if you dehumanize those around you enough, you can think of yourself as a good parent, a loving father, mom, etc., and be part and parcel of atrocities. Okay? It wasn't what he approved of, but that's not how it was taken. And that's because he invested himself in the Draka characters to make them human, at least among themselves. Right? It's an interesting risk that you take. And some people create characters who everybody wants to be, and other people create characters who people are like, God, I can't wait to see him get his. But there's still a lot of the writer in all those characters. There's less of me in many of my villains. Well, no, let me flip that. There's an awful lot of me in a lot of the villains because the things that they do that are villainous are the things that under the wrong circumstances I could see myself doing in violation of my own value system. Okay? It's interesting when you realize that that's what you've been creating. But
if there was an evil David Weber,
sometimes it's even worse than that. It's something that you can see yourself doing, not because you're the evil David Weber, but you can see yourself doing it to take the easy way out or something in a situation, and you realize when you're looking at the character that was the first step on the slippery slope.